Welcome to yet another interesting episode and interesting module for Omega module. And this is again continuing our this data storytelling and insights part. And in this particular section, primarily we will talk about the guided principles of conducting data analysis. And here in this module, this is actually the fourth module, I would say the sub-module of the first module. And here we are talking about the guided principle, the steps actually. The first part would be to identify the problem, that okay, which domain, which segment we are talking about, and then formulate the question. What are the questions that we are going to ask the audience, or what are the questions that we are going to ask to the business? That is the most important part. And then we identify the variables. So when I say variables, so actually speaking about the segments of data that will take part in the analysis. What is static? What is variable? In other terms, we will talk about the measures and the KPIs and the dimensions and the facts. And very interestingly, we'll talk about dimensions in detail in our next section. And then we talk about the scope of this entire project, the scope of the story actually. So who is going to see this and who is going to listen to the story, at what time, how many times in a day this story will be delivered. So all these sections are coming up in terms of the scope as well. And finally, we see that, okay, with the given data and the ask of the story, are these two things matching? So that's what we are going to see in this guided principles part. Now, this has got an understanding, I mean, definitely when you talk about story, we need to actually focus on something called the software part as well. So the software part, in the sense I'm talking from the perspective of how to take or how to identify which type of software will be, proper for you. So in terms of, let's say if the data is heavy and the data is actually going into different dimensions, then we need to work with a BI software. Definitely we are going to talk about Power BI in detail in this particular section. But definitely the purpose of using, why I'm talking about this is, it is very important we identify that whether Excel can take care of the same BI situation, or you need Power BI as a specialized software, or it can be done directly as a pro software in the cloud. So that is very important to understand. And again, the 4 V's comes into picture over here. I say that, okay, if the data is, the V's are less, less volume, less variety, and less velocity. So I say that, okay, the data is coming in once in a week, maybe. And when the data is coming, and when the data is coming to the system, it is, let's say, just in KBs. And if you talk about, let's say, once in a day or something in KBs, and then the varieties also we talk about that, okay, the data is only coming from a CSV file or an Excel or a flat file or an S3 bucket or something like this, then Excel is good enough to work with. But when you say that, okay, this is increasing, it is coming in MBs, it is coming in minutes, not in days or weeks, something like this, then in that case, you use sophisticated tools like Power BI. There is a difference between, when we talk about two concepts of data, one is the reliability, understanding the reliability of the data, and understanding the validity of the data. It is very important to understand the definitions of it. So you have the definitions in front of you on the screen. I'm not going to read all these things, but the crux of the story is that you identify your data, where is your appropriate data, identify those clusters, do some kind of advanced analytics concepts and talk about that, and then decide what kind of visualization would be the best for your data. So let's move on to a small demo to understand that, okay, how we are going to understand what is the landscape of the data and what kind of stories we can develop out of this data. So if I may just go to this data. So this is a data, let's say this is Nike's data, factory locations data. This is again got from either Kaggle or GitHub. You can actually get this data. And then you see that there are actually, this is actually called a tabular data. If you look at the data, this is a tabular structured data, and we have got just 600 odd records over here. But now what happens is, we have got two different models of data. One is the tabular model, and one we call it as the multi-dimensional model. So when the data is small and when the data is actually flat, everything can be organized and can be visualized in one table. We are okay with our tabular data as well. But when we see that the data is complex, it is going on to, let's say, thousands and millions of records, we tell and we suggest that you build up a multidimensional model. What is a multidimensional model? How does it look like? How do you prepare that? So I'm just giving you some examples. Imagine factory type. Now factory type is actually, if you see, I mean different segments, different sectors are there, finished goods, materials and all these things. But actually speaking, if I may say, if I talk about a dimension, the factory type dimension only has got these three components: finished goods, finished good components and materials, which means that if I make a dimension with these three records only, I will be able to slice and dice this entire data set in terms of factory, or in terms of factory goods or something like this, or factory type kind of thing. So this is very important, and as you can see, as I'm proceeding towards the right side, you can see the same thing can happen with product type also, and I can see that, okay, this product type is getting connected or recorded for every record, but actually speaking there are only 4 different types, which is apparel, equipment, footwear and materials. Now there is one way you can actually use the entire Excel just like that, get it into Power BI and make your visualization. That is possible given the data is small. But as I said, if the data is huge, in that case I would definitely recommend that break them all into dimensions. How do we do it? When we go to the Power BI segment, I will be showing you live all these components actually. So be it like, now you can understand that, okay, how from a tabular data dimensions are extracted. And what is the need of extraction of this dimension? That we will see when we actually go to the Power BI modules and Power BI segments actually. Okay. So from the perspective of this module, we are done. We are talking about from the demo perspective. We just had a small demo on this. Coming up next is the most, I would say, an enlightening segment of this entire module, and we call it as Rupam's Mundus Nervus. Mundus Nervus, I had taken it, I mean actually this is a word, and Latin word, and it means new world. So using this particular module, using this particular program, I am actually trying to introduce to a new world of possibilities, a new world of data, stories and all these things. That's why the next segment is known as Rupam's Mundus Nervus. So we will see the tips and tricks of data storytelling into the next segment. Thank you so much for being with us. Have a nice day. Thank you.